Oh, Lexar, that is an interesting question. Do we think that Mercedes was sandbagging? I doubt it. I would not believe how one could be sandbagging while producing such car behavior. So, you know, you saw Lewis Hamilton sliding, locking up the rears, having a bad rear end balance. The car felt lazy. It lacked the rear end grip. I mean, how would you want to sandbag in order to achieve a car driving and behaving like this without having the actual problem? See my point? What I do believe we have seen Lewis Hamilton's lap time with the C5 tyre being 1 second off the pace from Max Verstappen with a C4 tyre. Gonna tell you something. If Verstappen had fuel load X and Mercedes had surely 50-60 kilograms on top of that, I do believe that Red Bull is certainly close. In race pace, I could even believe the Red Bull to have the upper edge over the Mercedes. But I think Mercedes is smart enough to play the long-term game, you know. They were slow in testing, indeed, and they even were sandbagging last year in Barcelona. Not sandbagging, but they were slow considerably. Like, they still won, I think. Did they win? Can't remember. I think they won last year, the testings. Maybe just by a tenth or two. But remember, the first race, they nearly had a full second of gap to Verstappen. Or 7/10, something like that. Like, it was huge. And whenever you have seen people talking about Mercedes, like, you know, all the media is about, oh, how bad is Mercedes, how bad is Mercedes struggling and whatnot. I mean, call me a hypocrite or call me an idiot, but I looked at those hot laps they were done by Hamilton, and yes, of course, he did have issues, but when watching that Mercedes, it looked so lazy out of the turns. It looked so lazy and heavy through the fast turns as well. Going up the hill, not even reaching into 7th gear. You know, I clearly got the impression that they were heavy. And like, not heavy, but considerably heavy. I do not think that they have by far built the fastest car. Because of the rule changes. I'm gonna explain that in a couple of seconds. Or a couple of minutes. Yes, exactly. 59 burst says exactly that. They will sort it out and be on top. Because arguably they have been very smart. Because what they did now, they did now have the 3 days of testing. Of pre-season testing. But different than any other team. They just booked their filming day into Bahrain, and I think it was today, if I'm not mistaken. And on filming day, I believe you are allowed to turn up to 100 kilometers on driving distance while going around the track in full speed or whatever speed in order to make the car look good and whatnot. Which effectively means I do think that they gathered a lot of data on Friday and Saturday. And I would not be surprised. You know what? It wouldn't be Mercedes if they turn around with new parts on the car on Tuesday. Well, today. Test them and evaluate their performance on media day. You know, it would not be Mercedes if they wouldn't do that. Yeah, Anthony, but you know the chassis vibrations may still be the same. Regular tires back and forth. I don't think that they have an issue with working with the tires. That's what they checked on the actual testing. But you know, here is the reason. I just mentioned this one lap ago here. Why I think Mercedes had a little bit more to suffer than anyone else. So with the new regulations for this year not being a big factor or not being a big change, but approximately taking away between 7 and 10% of the downforce in the rear area of the car underneath the chassis, so underneath the floor. What FIA basically did is they cut out a little piece right before the rear end tires of the chassis, which affects cars that had a low rake philosophy, e.g. Mercedes, a lot more than Red Bull. So since we're just crashed, let me get probably, well, it is a wrong model, but basically, you know what? Let me just change the camera real quick. It will F up everything else, but that's gonna be fine. Right. Let me see on the scene. Nice. What you can see at the top, I'm gonna move this even better, is, well, you can see a Ferrari model, and what they got is a nice little rake. So to make this a little bit more drastic, so I'm gonna zoom in a bit. Oh, you guys can see loads of stuff of my flat right now. Anyway, so looking into the Mercedes, or looking in general into, let's say, the aerodynamical issue. So what had Red Bull last year basically was like the front scratching on the ground with the rear being pretty much up in the air. That was a proper rake going on. So what happened now? FIA regulations now kind of cut out a piece right here, like in that area, roughly before the rear tires. With a low rake, that area is very crucial in order to produce rear downforce, as the lower the rear is, you need to have a very, very vacuumizing and I need to Google that word, excuse me. You need to have a very vacuumizing and abdichten, vacuumizing and sealing. Yeah. So plugging a leak, or yeah, you need to have a very sealing chassis. You need to have a very, very sealing floor in order to keep the airflow below the rake, below the chassis, to produce the downforce here at the front. Because effectively the diffuser, interestingly, takes, I think, up to 30% of the rear downforce, which in hindsight means high rake is nothing else than just having a different philosophy and trying to seal the floor by not allowing too much air at the front anyway. That means, though, a little bit more drag, a little bit more efficiency on the rear wing. So that is what Red Bull's philosophy was. That is also what I think Racing Point's philosophy was. And effectively also AlphaTauri's philosophy. So to me, it's not a surprise at all that AlphaTauri and Red Bull have been to be seen at the front of the testing due to the fact that they were using their high rake. However, Mercedes, and also interestingly Aston Martin, and I have no idea why they did that, they went further down below. So they had the low rake variants, and what they did effectively was, they bunched up their rear So they made the rear a lot more tight around the engine cover, trying to get the airflow more to the rear wing, therefore, making up for the loss of downforce produced by the underwear, and no, not underwear, by the floor. So I think that is effectively the issue of Mercedes right now. So what I heard, what they did in order to make up for that was making the front endlessly stiff, which, well, in hindsight, has worked to the extent that they could drive the car so that we're not spinning around and everything. But of course, the car didn't have, have the desired balance. That's for sure. That Ferrari has been left starving for literally 5 or 6 years, to be honest. So in that regard, I gotta say, Mercedes do have an issue, yes, but they got one of the best engineers in the entire circuit or in the entire grid. So honestly, I wouldn't worry about Mercedes because Mercedes is being Mercedes, and we'll just come back with something genius. And I'm pretty sure they got something in the works already. Like, as I say, it wouldn't be Mercedes if they come up with a solution fairly quick. Uh, yeah. So camera back in business. um. Yeah. So that is what I think about testing. Since we speak about Lexa. um. Well, John Duncan, the problem is presumably the small change of regulations hit Mercedes harder since they had the low rake philosophy. And well, effectively, that's how shall I say this? It hit Mercedes surely harder than it did hit Red Bull or any other team that runs a high rake. That's for sure. Because the high rake philosophy doesn't rely so much on the floor in order to produce the downforce required at the back. That said, I mean, you guys have seen last year's Mercedes. Like, honestly, at Spa, let's talk about fungus. The chicane between Pujon and into Sector 3, they took that in qualifying in 6th gear, flat out, and it felt like even the engine wasn't powerful enough to unsettle the rear at 250 kph exit speed. That was just how massive the rear end was working. Like, their last year's car, honestly, I'm gonna say this, last year's Mercedes F1 car, and we're not speaking about lap time, we're not speaking about overall power and whatnot, but let's talk about perfection. Let's talk about design. Let's talk about behavior. Let's talk about drivability. I do believe that last year's Mercedes has been one of the best ever built cars in Formula One history. Full stop. Like that car, I was looking at it. There's so much power. I mean, up to 1,000 brake horsepower. And when you look, especially Hamilton driving, there was one qualifying lap, I can't remember which one, but he just, it was just like, that was Hamilton driving. Or there's a right turn, and let's go to a left turn, and even if there is a chicane, I go right, I go left, and that is how the Mercedes drove. Like, they haven't had to correct at all. The car was just glued stick to the ground. And John Duncan, I may not be 100% sure about the 1988 McLaren Honda. Yes, that was a fabulous, absolutely mega car. But I have never seen it drive. I've never, watched the times back since 1988 that didn't exist yet. So therefore, I believe I have a bad reference, but like consciously watching F1 since 2006, 2007, maybe the Ferrari F1 2004 by chance has been a pretty damn good car. But yeah, I think that's it about F1 at this stage now. Yes, 100%, John Dong. I mean, looking to drive, or just watching the Mercedes drive has been just sick, like so phenomenally good. Last year. So yeah, as a Mercedes fan, of course, I do have some, well, not doubts, but of course I was watching this a bit and was like, okay. But yeah, at the end of the day, once again, I do have full trust into Mercedes. Like, this team, like, starting with Toto Wolff, each of his reactions in the past 6 years, while being in command for whatever scenery, just tells the full story behind that full team. Like, you know, there is this saying, a fish always stinks from the head. That has usually been used to describe a situation that is fairly bad in either a company or a team or whatever. But it does apply to Mercedes in the same way, because in this case, it's like the fish's perfection is going to start at the head, and that's absolutely describing the scene with Toto Wolff. That guy is striving and working for perfection, and every little gear, every little screw in that team, every of the over 1,000 people working at the factory or working on racetrack, everyone is working for perfection. Like, you know, they have multiple 1-2s in the last couple of years. Yet though, if there was a tight 1-2, it was Mercedes that'd be seen still having a long debrief after the race. And that is just their working spirit, and you gotta say, you can hate Mercedes as much as you want. Yes, I'm a Mercedes fanboy, but you have to admit, and you have to also acknowledge that this group is probably by far the most overall complete team in the world. And you see the tragedy last year at Bahrain with a fucked up pit stop of Bottas and Russell. How deep in the wire that goes into Mercedes, how deep they are investigating, and obviously also how much they tell the public about their issues. There's a very good point what you raised there with Shortot and Ross Brawn, and yes, of course, Ross Brawn and Shortot as a combo, as a duo, have done outstanding work back then at Ferrari. There's no way around that. And yes, I may be a bit biased towards Mercedes, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to just state facts. Yes, exactly, John. That is why it was such a big deal. Like, you know, Ferrari would have fucked up that pit stop. You would like, it's just, you know, one of many that year. But the overall perfection robot machine, Mercedes, has done a rare mistake that wasn't to be seen in the earlier days at all. But that is Formula 1, you know. And also, you have to say, it also shows the talent and the masterclass of George Russell. Besides the fact, of course, that Mercedes have been the best car in terms of drivability, that Russell just hops in and performs like he never drove anything else than a Mercedes this year. That was mind-blowing. I mean, due to Corona, we've seen many things. We've seen Hülkenberg being reactivated and doing a fairly properly job, not gonna lie. But to see Russell just jump into the Mercedes and dominate Bottas, like really dominate on him, wow, like the guy is the next Max Verstappen. We can enjoy ourselves with masterclass battles between Russell and Verstappen in the future of Formula 1, including Leclerc as well. But that was impressive. Yeah, I've never felt so bad for a single driver. Like, to me that's of course absolutely random. In the meanwhile, I've done a push lap here, and I'm gonna do another one. But I've never felt so sorry for, you know, I say random driver because, you know, I do admire the work and the performance of Russell, but I'm no actual fan for him. Yeah, that's also the hunger of a young spirit, a guy full of spirit that wants to drive the Mercedes so bad. I'm pretty sure. So yeah, that is the story about what I think about F1. Also, what I believe, everyone is like slacking on Aston Martin a bit. Yes, they haven't performed well, but I would not underestimate Aston Martin and the Racing Point guys. They will do pretty well. And to come back on the topic, that even on media day you're not working around with the tires being used in the season. Yes, that's true. But whatever rear tire, well, kind of rear tire you use, I mean, you still use the dimensions of that tire, even though it is a different compound. The problem that Mercedes was fighting, I think, wasn't really tire performance. I think they are fighting an aerodynamical balance issue, and in order to eliminate that, you don't have to rely on the tire compound as long as the dimensions of the tire will be the same, and I'm pretty sure that will be the same at least. So Mercedes have another 100-kilometer possibility to test new parts, test a different philosophy on a setup, and at least get some data. And really, it just takes 2 or 3 laps to get them. .59 burst, very true. Mick and Yuki, of course. Mick with big expectations to the name, and Yuki, I gotta say, I was genuinely impressed by the kind of laps he put down in the end of testing. So yeah, that's I think that's my final word on the testings.